Money, next to family and your faith is top of mind. I've never met anybody that has a neutral feeling about it. You either feel really good about your situation or you don't feel good about your situation. I think a lot of people believe that they need a lot of money to start. There's so many options now to get started that you don't need a lot. But I wouldn't wait. Time in the market beats time in the market. My name is Stephen Jones. I'm a certified financial planner. And today, Nicole and I are going to answer the top 10 most searched financial questions.
So the first question today is, how much should I have in my emergency fund?
So this is a great question because this is where we start. Okay, this is the foundation, just like building a house or anything. The foundation has to be strong. If not, everything else is going to fall apart. We have to start here because everything else we're going to talk about in the video will fall apart if you don't do this. Emergency fund, in plain simple terms, is just like a savings account at the bank for you to access anytime, day or night, weekends. It's liquid, it's accessible, and it should be about 3 to 6 months of expenses built into the account. So, if you're making $50,000 a year, you're gonna have several thousand in this account to get to for car repairs, home repairs, just unforeseeable events that happen in everybody's life. If you have a fluctuating income, like if you're in sales, you get paid commissions, that kind of thing, or you're self-employed and just things are up and down, you might try to have a little bit more in that account, more than 3 to 6 months. That way you just have a little bit more cushion. If you have a steadier job or dual income, that kind of thing, maybe you don't need as much. You still need 3 to 6, but maybe you don't need more than that. Yeah, so things to remember with the emergency fund is this is not an investment account. So you don't want to treat your investment accounts as an emergency fund, completely separate. So liquid, it doesn't make a lot, we know that, but it's the backup plan for anything that could happen in your life.
So when you say investment, you're talking about the savings.
Yeah, the savings account is gonna pay some interest for you. To me, that's not investing. Investing is buying something and it appreciating or depreciating, right? You partake in that. So investments would be investing in the stock market, index funds, mutual funds. This is just a savings account.
So curious, where should I keep my emergency fund?
So I would keep a small amount in the local bank, so that way you can get to it nights and weekends and all that. The larger amounts you can always keep in a high yield savings account. There's a lot of online banks. Credit cards have savings accounts now that are FDIC insured. And those usually provide more interest than your local bank. The goal is not to have a lot of interest generated on this money because it is for emergencies, but they usually pay about 2 to 3%, and so it doesn't make it worthwhile. You just need to keep in mind that it could take 2 to 5 days to get your money, either sending it there or receiving it. So that's why you keep a little bit in the local bank that you can get to. I think what you also need to keep in mind is this money needs to be liquid, so you don't want to invest it in the stock market. Yes, the stock market can be liquid, but it's very volatile. So if you had $1,000 in your emergency fund, yeah, it could be $1,200 next month, or it could be $750 next month. So keep this money liquid, safe, in an account that you know the value of.
So Stephen, should I pay off my debt or invest it?
Should you pay off your debt or invest? That's a good question. So I think you need to define the different levels of debt first. So you have consumer debt, which is like credit cards, personal loans, car loans, mortgages, and all that. And then student loans are also thrown in there. Each one of those has their own type of interest. So normally credit cards have a higher interest rate, 19, 22%. And as you kind of work your way down to cars, maybe your cars have 7 to 9%. And then your home hopefully is in a 3 to 5 type range. And so if you view it that way, you want to try to attack the highest amount first. So if you do have credit cards, you need to be paying off those as quickly as possible, hopefully every month. So you're not paying 19 or 22% interest. If you have a problem with credit cards, you think you need to start to respect them for what they are. They're good. There's nothing wrong with them as long as you respect them and understand how they work. But if you're just charging things and making minimum payments, you need to start there, tackle that debt, and then address the problem on why that keeps happening. If you have to go Dave Ramsey and cut up the credit cards, that's fine. Then you can kind of start to invest and see where you're at. If you have the emergency fund set up, you're paying off debt, I definitely would take advantage of like employer plans. So like you have an employer that's matching 3, 4, 5%, take advantage of that because that's free money. And then start to pay off those debts and high interest first all the way down. Homes and cars are kind of in my category of good debt. Credit cards and all that or personal loans can be considered bad debt. But good debt is okay because the mortgage is a long time, 15, 20, 30 years. Cars are not that long, and then credit cards need to be immediate.
Okay.
And so I think if you think about it that way and you have a method of attacking each one, then you can invest and save, or pay off debt and save and invest at the same time.
So a lot of people are wondering, how much house can they afford?
That's a great question too. So if you go to the bank, I'm gonna pick on banks a little bit, they're gonna loan you more than you probably want to. They're gonna approve you for more than maybe you're comfortable with. So if you're saying my range is 250 to 300, maybe they approved you for 400 and you can make that payment, but should you make that payment? So a good rule of thumb is 28% of your gross income. So if you make 100,000 a year, 28,000 a year should be for mortgage payments, no more. So hopefully you can have less than that, but no more than 28% of your gross income should be for mortgage payments. That also includes taxes, insurance, any PMI or anything you're paying like that. So all that should total up to hopefully 28% or less.
So is that joint income or is that just off of one?
Yeah, joint. So you can apply that to either single or joint families. But also factor in everything that kind of comes with a home, right? When you rent, you don't have to worry about upkeep and all that, taxes or anything. So you need to keep in mind that there is taxes, insurance, and all that built into the payment. And that'll add to the 28%. Overall, you should really only have about 36% in debt. So if you add your mortgage, home, personal loans, student loans, all that stuff should be no more than 36%.
So if I have a little bit of extra cash, should I invest that or should I pay off debt?
I think it kind of comes down to your long-term plans. Like if this is the forever home, which is hard to say, right? Because you're going through buying a house and I just moved and everything. So it is hard to say, is this my forever home? If it is your forever home, yes, I think you should strive to make extra payments, but you should not give up investing. You kind of have to do both at the same time. If you have a really low interest rate, some people out there still have 2s and 3s, you long-term can make more money investing, yes. So if you're paying off the house early and making extra payments, you're really only investing at your interest rate, 2, 3, 4, 5%. Well, long-term market returns are 10, 11, so you kind of have to gauge where you're at there. Also, I would throw in there again, take advantage of employer plans and matches, always. So if you do have extra money and you're not getting the match at work, strive to get that, and then you can invest in other instruments.
Is there a certain amount of time that we should wait to try and pay more towards the house payment?
I think that comes down to the individual person, how much they already have saved, what they're already doing. If you have the emergency fund, you're contributing 15, 20% to retirement, you have no debt other than the house, by all means, pay more towards the house if that's the end goal. I would say if your plan is to move in 5 to 10 years, maybe it's not best to contribute extra money to the house because it's not the forever home. I don't think you should sacrifice retirement savings because you can never really borrow for retirement, right? It's all about what you've saved. There are other, Social Security, pension systems set up for that, but you're gonna have to save most of your retirement. So I would strive to save as much as you can while keeping the house payment low and the debt low. More than likely, if you can't save for retirement and pay on a house, you probably have too much house.
So the next question people are asking is, should I pay off my car early?
So that's a great question. I think it kind of comes down to the type of car you're buying, the terms, obviously, and the interest rate that you're paying, how much you put down. So if it's a luxury car, I think you should strive to pay that off quickly, 1 to 2 years, because historically, they're more expensive. I'm talking Lexus, Mercedes, BMW, way up there. If it's Lamborghini, Ferrari, all that kind of stuff, I think you should strive to pay that off in the 1 to 2 year period and get that done with. If it's kind of more of your traditional commuter car, point A to point B and all that, follow the normal terms, hopefully get a lower rate. If you can get the 3 to 5 range, and then strive to pay that off if you do have extra money, like we've talked about. I have heard horror stories of people having $1,200 a month car payments. That's just too much car. Nobody should be paying $1,200 a month. I think the average right now is floating around the $800 a month range, which still, that scares me. And that doesn't make me feel good inside. If I had to make that payment, I would not feel good about that. So I think if you're in that boat, you probably have too much car. And cars sometimes are status symbols and they bring a lot of joy, and I get that. But it's okay to sell the car, pay off the loan, and get a cheaper car, if you will, that you can afford. There's nothing wrong with driving a 95 Toyota Camry, They all serve the same purpose. So that's kind of my view on, should you pay it off early?
Well, what if you're someone that has like a 12 to 15% interest rate on a car?
Then you should hopefully, if you can and you're not upside down, sell the car and then try to find something that you can afford. Because chances are, if it's that high, the bank has assessed that maybe you have problems making payments, or there's, they foresee you maybe defaulting on the loan for some reason, and so they are charging you more. And so probably best to get that down and get out from underneath that car if you can. Another thing I'd like to point out is you should not use your emergency fund to pay your car payments or even your investment accounts. I'm not a fan of taking from assets that can grow or have the potential to grow to pay off a depreciating asset. So in that kind of follow up on that, you probably have too much car, right? If you have to take from emergency fund or investments to pay off the car or to make those payments, you probably have too much car. So you don't want to sacrifice assets that can appreciate on ones that depreciate. So another rule of thumb that you can follow, kind of like the 28% rule and the 36% rule on debt, is your car value shouldn't be no more than 50% of your income. So we'll continue with 100,000. You probably shouldn't buy a car that's worth more than 50,000. So you can kind of see that range. Now I understand a lot of cars these days start around 50, so that can be hard, but there are a lot of new cars out there in the 30 to 50 range.
So what if you don't have a mortgage and you just want to buy your favorite car?
Ooh, well now you got me thinking because I'm a car person. Well, hopefully if you don't have a mortgage, you've done very well. You've paid it off early or on time and you have money set aside. So hopefully you can pay cash. I would say if you're in that mindset and you've already paid off everything, you can probably afford to wait and save up for the car.
So you think that someone should use cash rather than financing when they could put the cash in investments?
Yes, because I think there's a mental process that happens when you don't have any of those payments. Like just knowing you're driving a car that's paid off and not having to make those monthly payments. There's something to that. I'm assuming in that situation, you're already doing all the other things. And if the goal is to maintain the debt-free lifestyle, then you're gonna want to pay cash for that vehicle. Even if you could invest it and make more money, you're probably already doing that. But to me, it's a mindset deal.
So a big question people are asking right now is, what's the difference between saving and investing?
So saving is more short-term goals. So the emergency fund, down payment on a house or maybe down payment on a car, school, expenses that you can foresee in the next, say, 1 to 5 years. That stuff needs to be safe in a savings account, high yield savings, that kind of thing. That way you can get to it and it's there. If you know you need 20,000 in 5 years, you want the 20,000 to be there. You don't want to worry about market volatility. If it's 5+ years, I would say you can go shift towards the investment route. So if you have college expenses you want to pay for, weddings, cars, retirement, that's the long-term focus. So it kind of comes down to time horizon and when you're going to actually need the money. We like to tell people, if you put the money in and come back in 6 months, I can't really guarantee you've made anything. You might have lost money, but the chances are if you come back in 5 or 10 years, you will have made something.
So for people that are investing, do you recommend them just not looking at it for a certain amount of time?
I wouldn't look at it daily, that's for sure. Or, I think monthly is healthy. Keep track of everything. If you're doing it yourself, you're probably paying more attention to it. Of course, apps and stuff these days, it's easy to just log in and pull up the account balance. If you're working with somebody, hopefully they're looking at it for you and giving you updates along the way. Psychologically, I think you probably shouldn't look at it every day. Yeah. It'll probably drive you insane.
Probably. So at what point should someone move from savings to investing?
Once you've hit that emergency fund, so you get that couple thousand in there, then you got the 3 to 6 months and you're not saving for anything else. You're already saving for retirement. You've got the house at least set up or you're making extra payments and all that. Then you could shift from savings to investing. I think it kind of comes down to what you're saving for. You can't have too much in a savings account. It's losing purchasing power due to inflation. You're only kind of keeping pace with all that. And so you can have too much in a savings account, but it's going to come down to your individualized goals.
So should people still build on their savings even if they have that 6 months? Do they continue to put into the savings monthly,
I would try to.
quarterly?
I think that just me personally since it's the backup plan to always be adding to it. I don't think you ever get to a certain amount and just stop. Because like I said earlier, that would lose purchasing power due to inflation. So your $50,000 today is not going to be $50,000 in a couple of years. So yes, you need to keep adding to it. It's just over time, expenses and everything goes up. Your income has gone up, hopefully. So you need to keep adding to it.
All right, so the next question is, what's the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA?
So this is a fun one. So Roths have been around since about 98. Senator Roth came out with the tax-free version of retirement savings. The traditional IRA and 401k have been around for a long time. So you would put the money in to your IRA or 401k and receive a tax deduction that year for what you put in. That money grows for hopefully 20, 30 years until you take it out, and you pay tax on it at that point in time. So you get a tax deduction now, you pay tax later, hopefully in retirement. The idea on that is I got a tax deduction when I was working and I had higher income, and in retirement my income is lower, so I'm paying a lower rate. The Roth IRA, you put the money in now, you don't get a tax deduction, but when you take it out, it's all tax-free, even the gain and everything you've made over these 20 or 30 years. And so one is tax-free and one is taxable. It just kind of comes down to, did you get a deduction or not for what you put into them? And that applies to the 401k as well. So now most employer plans have the Roth 401k and the traditional.
So is there a certain age range that you would recommend for one or the other?
Roths are really good for younger people. If your income's in a way lower, if you will, where you're not paying a lot of taxes now. So if you're in a lower tax bracket, it might make sense to go ahead and just pay the tax now, because you're probably going to be in a higher tax bracket down the road. And that kind of is, and vice versa on the traditional IRA. Roth IRAs have income limitations. And so you can only make so much money. If you make over that, you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. Now within the Roth 401k plan, there are no income limitations. So if you have one of those, you can still do the Roth 401k, just not the Roth IRA.
So what do people do if they make too much money for either option and they don't have an option for a 401k?
And they still want to do Roth assets? That's probably a question for another video.
Okay, all right.
It's called the backdoor Roth, and there's a lot of rules and requirements, so I would suggest anybody listening to review those, with their tax preparer. But basically, you make a non-deductible IRA contribution, and then you convert it to a Roth IRA, because there's no income limits on conversions. So if someone is 40s to 50s and they have a lot of money in an IRA and they want to start converting to a Roth every year, they can. They just pay tax on what they convert. So if you converted 25,000 this year, it would be like you made an extra 25,000 and you'd pay tax on that. But that's a good strategy too. So either one of those would work for somebody who makes too much money and doesn't have the Roth 401k option.
So a big question people are asking right now is also, how do you start investing with limited money?
So I'll go back to the employer plan, because there are no limits on that, because that's through payroll. So you can pick a dollar amount or a percentage of your pay, and that'll come out every paycheck to go into the account. Other ways, most mutual funds and individual stocks and all that have a $50 to $250 minimum to get started. So you can do $50 a month into a mutual fund to meet the minimum and all that. And there's a lot of apps and online brokerage firms now that don't have a minimum at all. I think I would make it worth your while, $50 to $100 a month or so to start out. But there's a lot of institutions now that allow you to start with a minimal amount.
So your minimum, you would say no less than 50 a month?
I would say, yeah, I would think make it significant. Try to invest at least 50 or so a month to make it worthwhile. If you can only do 25, you can only do 25. You're at least saving. I wouldn't do $5.
Right.
I would try to make it worth your while, because I think there's something mentally, again, that happens when you start to save. Oh, I'm doing 50, I didn't even notice it. Now I'm doing 100, I didn't even notice it. Now I'm doing 500 a month, I didn't even notice it.
So you definitely recommend doing the payroll when there's not a lot of funds?
Yes, yeah, if you can do payroll, that's great, because more likely you're not going to see it. It's going to be on your pay stub. You're going to see that 3 or 5% that went in, but over time, you're probably not even going to notice it. I think a lot of people believe that they need a lot of money to start. And like I said earlier, there's so many options now to get started that you don't need a lot. And a lot is relative, right? We don't know what a lot is, because that's different for each person. So I would say that time in the market beats time in the market. There's a thought of, well, I want to try to find the best days, right, to get in and start investing. And you're never going to determine that. There's about 10 of the best days within any given year. And if you miss them, your returns are cut out about half, sometimes up to 80%, depending on the year and the time horizon that you look at. And so I would say start when you can, and don't worry about trying to track the market or time it or when's the best time to get in or out for that matter.
So what would you recommend to somebody if they are ready to back out because they're scared?
I think if somebody is contemplating getting out, you have to remember that you have to make two decisions. You have to make the decision on when to get out and when to get back in. So it's like a train that's always moving. The stock market is the train and it's always moving. It's never going to stop for you. So if you have to get off here and then you have to decide when to jump back on. You can't get back on in the same place you were at. So you have to make two decisions if that's something you're considering.
A popular question right now is, what's a realistic rate of return on investments?
So it really kind of comes down to your risk tolerance and how you're invested. So how much is allocated to stocks versus bonds, fixed income, that kind of thing. People who are aggressive, if we want to use that word, who have a lot of stocks in their portfolio, will probably see on average about a 10 to 11% return. Now some years they'll have 20 or 30%. There's been record years, like the last 3 years, you've seen double-digit returns within those portfolios. The more conservative people who have maybe 40% bonds, 60% stocks are kind of in that 7 to 8 range, and kind of goes down as more conservative. I do think you can get too conservative and it might not even be worth your while. So let's say you had 20% in stocks and 80% in bonds. You're probably gonna make 3 to 4%. Maybe sometimes you just made 1%. You kind of have to ask, is it worth the risk that I'm taking to generate that return? Or is there something else that I could do to get that's conservative, that I don't have to worry about? So it really kind of comes down to how much is allocated and where it's allocated.
So let's say someone is like moderate risk, straight half and half, let's say stocks and bonds. What's the expectation?
I would probably say the 5 to 6 range is what we see on average. There's gonna be years you're down in that portfolio. There's gonna be years you maybe made 10% on even a 50-50. But on average, as time goes on, you're probably gonna make in that 5 to 6 range. It's probably what you can expect.
So we've covered a lot of topics today. What should someone prioritize?
So I think first you need to start with the emergency fund, get that built up. Get that 3 to 6 months expenses. That's your backup plan. That's the foundation of all this. Then you want to get that employer match if you have one. So get the free money from them. Then you need to start paying off the high interest debt. So those credit cards, personal loans, any lines of credit, that kind of thing. Get those started to pay off. Once you're investing 15% to 20% retirement, you can start worrying about all the other stuff. Paying off the car, paying off the house, and kind of move on from there.
So is there a max amount or percentage someone should put into their 401k?
There are contribution limits. So that's a great question. So currently I think it's around $24,000 if you're 50 or younger, and then you get a catch up if you're 50 or older. So you can only put so much into a 401k. So let's say you were making $100,000, you'd max out at $24,000 a year. That does not include the match. So that's just what you can put in. They can still match on top of that. So those two numbers are not combined to get to the maximum contribution.
So when you say catch up, what does that mean?
So the IRS has built in to these systems, if you're 50 or older, you're what they call a catch up. So if you have not saved enough to this point and you want to start and you really want to stash back a lot of money, they will let you do that. So it's more than the standard amount. So for example, I think $24,000 for the traditional 401k, and then there's an additional, I think $7,500 catch up. Now you have what we'll call an after-tax account or a non-retirement account, which can still be used for retirement. It's kind of like a savings account with investments. You can put and take as much as you want. There's no limits. So you can put $100,000 in there if you wanted to and take $100,000 out. And there's no penalties or anything on that.
So are there any penalties if you were to take your retirement funds early?
Yeah, great question. So 401ks, all the employer plans, Roth, traditionals, they all have a 59.5 rule. So if you take funds out before 59.5, there's a 10% penalty assessed on the taxes owed on that amount. So it's not 10% of what you take out, it's 10% of the taxes owed. So let's say you owed $1,000, the penalty would be $100. So you always got to keep that in mind, that whatever you are putting back is long-term, because there is a penalty assessed. And like Roth IRAs and 401ks, if you do take out before 59.5, it might not be tax-free either. So that's something you have to consider.
Before we get to the last question, what is one thing I can do today to improve my financial situation?
I think most people should sit down and just assess where they are today. Okay, just get a notepad out, write everything out. Debts, income, what you have saved up, and start there. And list out everything you have and kind of assess where you are and how do you feel about your situation. So take that column there right next to your car loan. How do you feel about that? And then next to 401k savings, how do you feel about that? And tackle things that are kind of a hurting point for you and go from there. You're not gonna do it all at once. It's not gonna happen overnight.
Yeah.
This is things we tell clients all the time. It's a process, it's a plan, and it's really a lifelong journey. Money, next to family and your faith is top of mind for most people. Yeah. And money either has a positive effect on your life, a negative, or maybe you're just kind of neutral about it. But most people have a positive or a negative view of money. And so this strategy you can sit down and you can see how you really feel about your situation. And then most people, as we know, don't really make a decision until they need to or something happens. When everything's going good, most people are like, hey, everything's great, I don't need to do anything. When something bad happens is when they want to make changes. So if you sit down and you're like, I really don't feel good about this, I need to make a change. So I think that's a good strategy. People have a positive or negative feel. I've never met anybody that has a neutral feeling about it. You either feel really good about your situation or you don't feel good about your situation.
All right, so the last question for today is, what are the biggest mistakes people make with their finances?
I have a few, and there's no particular order here. I'll mention the emergency fund, not having one like we have throughout the video. So obviously if you don't have an emergency fund, where are you gonna go when you need money? And if all you have is investment accounts, you're gonna go to the investment accounts. So we've hit that a lot today. One that kind of gets me, and I joke about it sometimes, but it's true, not having all these retail credit cards. A credit card from every major department store, if you will, or big box store, and just because you saved a little bit of money up front, you have 10 credit cards. You probably need one or two. So try to get rid of that if you're in that situation, or don't fall prey at the register to that trap. And the follow-up with that is carrying a lot of high interest debt, credit cards being probably the highest, or just personal loans, those things, trying to get those out of the way. Because if you always have the debt lingering, it's always going to be there. It's like the cloud that follows you around. It's there. You can't do the other things in life if you're constantly worried about those. And then I think just starting, like being afraid to start, like just do it. Just start and get something going, and then things will happen over time. It's not going to happen overnight, but things will just start to happen. A lot of good things will start to happen when you start focusing on it.
So how can people avoid falling into those traps?
So the one-page strategy is good for sitting down, kind of listing out everything you have, seeing how you feel about each individual item, and starting there. So writing things out or keeping an Excel spreadsheet or some type of online software app is great. That's going to keep you on track, give you something to reference. Living on a budget, using apps to kind of track your expenses, or using a notebook, those kind of things. And then automating things is a great strategy, and that'll really help you not fall in the trap. So automatic savings at work, automatic savings to a retirement account through your checking account or something, or even automatic savings from your checking to your savings for that emergency fund. So if it's automatic, you'll just get used to it and you won't even realize it every month. And then if you want to go one step further, you can always hire a financial advisor to develop a plan for you, make you accountable, keep you updated along the way, provide advice. So we hope you found the information in this video valuable. If you'd like more information on Jones Financial Partners, you can click the link in the description. We look forward to seeing you guys next time.